Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier. Hello there, Chris.
Oh, hello, Alex. I was just looking up some words because here today on Tell the Damn Story, Alex Simmons and Chris Ryan are going to talk to you, everybody, about words. You remember, ladies and gentlemen,
it's the Sesame Street episode.
Yes, it's the Sesame Street episode. You remember, ladies and gentlemen, that Tell the Damn Story is about us reflecting the challenges of our journeys as writers to make your journey smoother.
That's
and
right.
Today, we're going to focus on words, because words are what we use to make blank pages into stories, and stories from gibberish to good, and then from good to great, and then hopefully from great to published.
Published.
How are you, Alex Simmons?
I am fine. By the way, folks, just for the gratification of those of you who are not been here before, this is Chris Ryan here, who's a wonderful hybrid author of detective stories, science fiction, horror. Chris, you've written almost everything I can think of, and was also a teacher of literature and writing, creative writing, for over 30 some odd years. Yay, Chris! And I'm Alex
30
Simmons.
years in the classroom. Holy crap.
Yep, there you go. And I'm Alex Simmons, also a freelance and professional author for over many years. And I've written comics, plays, screenplays, novels, and I am also a guest speaker internationally across the world, speaking on the power of creativity and imagination in our world. So here we are, as Chris said, to share with you the power, the versatility, the magic, the craftsmanship of using words to tell your stories.
Because, Alex, if you don't use words, you'll just be burning yourself.
Oh, jeez.
Did I not choose my words carefully?
Yes, you did. That was hot, man. That was hot. That was smoking. So, how are we tackling this today, Chris? Because you are launching this.
I'm going to launch this. All right. So we're going to come. We want to do some of these episodes where it's just Alex and I talking directly to you about very specific topics that will help your writing. Now, word choice and focusing on the words you use in your story, I'm calling that a fourth draft step. Okay. For me, and Alex does it a little bit, but he's always so much more sophisticated.
Oh,
but for me, first draft is get through the story. It's the one that I always say, let it suck, right? Just get your story onto the page, or these days onto the screen. Second draft is to go through it to make sure it makes sense. You might make changes and, oh, wow, I started calling this character Charlie, but in chapter 8, for some reason, he became Arturo. So we'll have to change that. So he's Charlie all the way through, or whatever. The third draft is clarity. That's where I work to finalize and fix any major plot problems. Oh, wow, this works to help set off the climax of the story, but no one sees it coming. I need to seed that idea back in chapter 3 and 8 and that kind of stuff. That's once you kind of know your story, then you're kind of fixing all that. But fourth draft, it should pretty much be in the best or close to the best condition, this story-wise, that it's going to be. And now you're looking to make it better, to make it sing, to make it entice potential publishers. And I call the fourth draft polishing the words, right? So today we want to talk about that and focus on what are you doing? You got the story the way you want it. What are you looking for? What else do you need to do before submission?
So let's roll back and start from the top again, because you've hit on 4 really key steps that are necessary. But let's niche down a little bit into your technique, and I'll share a little of mine in terms of how you approach each one of those steps, because I think that's going to be very useful to them too. For instance, you have said, and I know I've said the same thing to many of our students and clients, what is the purpose of the first draft?
Okay, you want to know my approach.
Yes,
All
yes.
right, so here's what I do.
Yeah, here's what he does. Pay attention.
I
Pay.
approach the first draft quietly from behind, and then I jump on it. No, here's what I do with the first draft. I get an idea. You always have ideas as writers, but that one starts screaming for more attention. And then my first step isn't really writing, it's wandering around with it, asking myself, what if, casting it. Who are these people? What do they do? What do they know? What would happen? And then what would happen? And then until I can tell the story in my head,
Mm.
then I go. And by the way, technique, I first heard about that technique from Joyce Carol Oates in a lecture she gave. If I'm not enough, she
Yeah,
is.
Joyce will
Yeah.
back him up.
The idea of the first draft, the approach is to sit down and write.
But in seats.
Yeah, seats, or sometimes I stand, whatever. Occasionally, the next idea comes, and following Tina Glorious around in the mall, and I just take my phone and I open up the note taking and I hit the voice and I just get the idea in and then transfer it over and like that. But the whole idea of the first draft is to open it up, open the file, and write.
And the reason for that is to get it out of your
Just
head.
get the whole story. Don't
Right.
worry about, I could probably do chapter one smoother. That's not this draft.
That's right.
I want to fix, that's not this draft. This draft is just getting it out.
Yes, but the
Let
dialogue isn't quite
it,
what it doesn't
yeah,
sound authentic, not
that's
this
not this
draft.
draft.
Yeah,
This
right.
draft
You
is
know,
to
we should
get
put
it
that on
out.
a t-shirt. That's not this draft.
That's not this draft. That's a t-shirt. The other t-shirt is let it suck,
Yep.
because this draft can suck. It doesn't matter. You're the only one who's going to see this draft.
And I often say that the first draft is you telling the story to yourself.
Yes.
That's it. Getting it out of your head, telling it to yourself so you can look at it finally
Yeah.
in front of you.
You
Yeah.
know, I was watching a masterclass done by Walter Mosley, the great
Mm.
Walter Mosley.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying he goes with this as well. He does slightly different, and the masterclass is worth taking. But he says if you going back and fine tuning, if you find yourself doing that, that's because you're procrastinating because you don't know what comes next. So stop, go make a cup of coffee and say, what happens next? And just go ahead. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. So you get that first draft out in whatever condition it exists in, it's fine. Pat yourself on the back. Next day you go in. Now, it depends on what you're writing. If you're writing a haiku, that could be a day at most. If you're writing a novel, you're going to be just going through the draft and letting it suck for a while. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the draft.
Mm-hmm.
How many writers do we know that have 3 or 4 novels, 3 to 12 to 20 chapters in on their computer that they net because they always go back and and they never get to being finished? Get your draft finished.
I'm sorry.
That
Were you saying we should finish the draft? Is that what you were saying?
Finish the draft.
Ah, that's
Yes,
what he says.
finish the draft.
Yeah, that's what
And
he
then
says.
you go to your second draft. It just has to make sense. It doesn't have to be great yet. Just okay. Is he Charlie all the way through, or did he suddenly become Arturo?
Did we start in New York and now suddenly we're in Bolivia? How did
Right,
that
all
happen?
those different things.
Right.
And then now some people they print it out and they make notes. Okay, fine. Some people go through on the screen, whatever works for you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're just reading through it. If you find yourself polishing, stop. That's not this draft. Just reading through it, fixing it. One of the things I do, one of the tricks I do is if I find a problem, I hit caps and I write needs rewrite and then denote the problem specifically.
Mm-hmm.
This drags, or where is the gun? You need a gun. If he's going to get killed by gunfire, you have to have
Yeah, it would be good because the
just
finger
simple
doesn't
things like
work
that.
that.
And none of it means you suck, and none of it means you can't write. And if your editor says you can't write, say, shut
In your
up.
head.
I'm in the process. So you
Yeah.
get through a second one, and then you say, all right, that's kind of in halfway decent shape. And then you go to third draft. That is where you go through and fix all your notes. And oh, I have to move a chapter, or I need to insert that gun, or I need to do a whole draft search for Arturo and make it Charlie. Whatever. That's where you're going to really go. And I'll pick up Walter Mosley's technique that he says he writes each day, and then the next day he rereads what he wrote and just fixes it up a little bit and continues on. When you're at Walter Mosley's level, you can do that from the jump.
Because you've built up enough habits, productive,
Right,
forward moving habits
right.
to allow you not to get caught in that rabbit hole. Fix, fix, fix.
But
Yeah.
as we're learning all that, get the
Yeah.
first draft done and then do all this. So here's where your third draft takes, this is going to take a little longer because you're polishing and you may go back a chapter and I just want to fix that this guy or this woman, she speaks like this, and I changed her accent. Oh, then that's what you do all the way through. And now you're saying, wow, that's something. Don't submit it yet. Don't get in line for your award yet. No, because at least you need to
Don't
go to
plan
the
the book
fourth
party.
draft.
Yeah.
And the fourth draft is what I want to talk about in detail here in the second part of our show. And here's what we can guarantee. If you stay around at the end, Alex has agreed to do the Watusi, which is you gotta see. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
telling you,
I'll
yeah,
get you for this. No, okay.
just telling you want to stay around for that.
Or not.
So what we're looking for in the fourth draft is think of it as self-care for your writer self. You're going to go through and see some of the habits that you have, and they're fine. You'll work them through, but that you don't want in the finished draft. That's all. They're not mistakes. It's just process. You may look at word choice, right? And it might be a simple thing, like a word like gun, Gun. It's a fine word. It's okay. Everybody knows what a gun is. But if you find that you use the word gun 112 times in your novel, you can change it up.
You
Is the
should
gun
change it
is the
up.
gun also a pistol? Is it a Smith and
Smith and
Wesson?
Wesson. It's
That's if
Smith
I
and
made a
Wesson.
thing.
Yes. A Smith
Is it
and
a
Wesson.
38?
Yeah.
There are other terms you can use,
Yeah.
right? If you're writing noir, like
Firearms.
if Teal was here, he would say, you can tell him it's the gat. I pulled out my gat, It depends. I don't think you can say gat in 2024,
Well, it
but
depends
if you're
on
in the
what you're writing. If
1930s,
yes,
maybe,
yes, yeah.
right? All of that starts coming into play. Your setting, your tone, who these people are, right? Because if you have a very proper person, he may say firearm, right?
Hmm.
And if it's someone more from the street, have a whole
Service
different word
revolver.
for it.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh,
Service
yes,
revolver.
yeah, service revolver. If
Yeah.
you're a police officer, you might say his service revolver.
Yep.
But these days, if it's a modern story, they don't use revolvers as police anymore. So it would be a 9 mil or whatever they use, or a 45. These are all things that you might have to do a little research, but it allows you to differentiate the words so that the word isn't always showing up, right? If
Redundant,
you have a word
repetitious.
that you
Yeah.
use too often, it starts hitting the reader in the forehead and knocks you out of the story. That's what all of this is. It's just finishing the illusion so that we can complete the circle
And
from writer to reader.
let me just stop, jump in there, and just say also, if at this point in hearing this you go, yeah, but stop yourself. because that's a part of your job as a writer. That's a part of your responsibility as a writer. That is the other voice in your head going, yeah, we can, or you're probably not. No, stop that. In order for the story to work best for you, to serve the story, but to serve yourself as the writer, whether you're an aspiring, emerging, or struggling, if you find, oh, yeah, but I don't know enough words, then take the time to go look them up.
Yeah.
Do not
Well,
fight the process that says, here's how to make it even better. All right. Don't
and
fight that. Yeah.
a thesaurus, sure. But even in Word, if you right click and go down the menu, it says synonyms.
Yep.
Sometimes you can get yourself started there and just, okay, oh, that would help, or that it is more that than like that. Sometimes it's just a matter of catching. I always tell writers to read your writing out loud as if you were getting paid 100 grand for a professional gig. Because if I just say read it out loud, a lot of readers go, what's
Yeah.
that? But if you are performing it, you will catch it. I was editing a story recently, and perfectly great writer used some kind of mountain range, period, the mountain. So in the span of 4 or 5 words, he had used the word mountain twice. Nothing illegal about that, nothing immoral, nothing sucky about that. But could we change one of them? So I think it was like the Black Mountains. So the second use of mountain, I said the range because he was talking about the
Mm.
mountains and it helps keep you in the flow of the story. One of the things we want people to do, readers to do, is to read the story. So the more ways we can keep them going, the better. If we're using a word over and over again, you start drawing attention to that word.
Here's also another way to think about it, not different way, but an additional way to think about it. The purpose of words in the written expression of a story, you can do it too if you're doing verbal presentations, but especially in the written word, is to paint pictures in the minds of the reader. So
Yes.
ultimately, if you're just saying the mountain, what kind of mountain? I can envision a particular mountain. Chris might envision a totally different mountain. And that might be okay if we're just talking mountains in general. But if we're talking about the Eiger sanction, if we're talking about Everest, then what does that look like? Can we add snow cap? Can we add rugged crags or cliff, something jagged points, something
Yeah.
that helps us, the reader, begin to envision a specific form
Yeah.
or pull in to better focus an image of this terrain. Now, again, Chris might see the Everest differently than I do, but there are going to be certain similarities. We're going to see this thing jutting up. We're going to see sharp points, and those points, those that jagged aspect, is going to add an edge to the
Right.
story itself. So again, we use words to help conjure images in the minds of the readers. Therefore, repetition becomes redundant, which, as Chris says, knocks people out of the
Right.
story.
And sometimes you might, I don't know enough to differentiate there. Go to the Google machine or whatever. Our friend Jim Byrne, Bur, Jim Beard, sorry, and John Bruner, our friends, they
Yes.
did a Western collection, and I was lucky enough to be in there. But I didn't know about trains, passenger trains from that era. So I started on Google and then I got way carried away. This is a
Down
kind
the
of a
rabbit hole.
warning because I wound up buying 3 or 4 books so I could study illustrations and learn names of the parts of the train. And I think I used them probably 12 little details sprinkled throughout the story. Certainly not 3 books worth of research, but you live and learn, right? and I had found most of the stuff before I bought the books.
Well,
So don't get
I'll mention
obsessive, but there are ways to differentiate.
I'll mention another writer, Don McGregor, who has done a plethora of material. But one of the things that Don did when he worked on the Black Panther for Marvel Comics was he designed the terrain of Wakanda that the story was taking place in, so that because he was doing this over a 12-issue story arc. So he wanted to know where everything really sat in a geographic structure so that whenever he referenced it in whatever issue, he was coming back to a point of reality for us. And that made the readers and the illustrator, it gave us a real world. He was building a world, and we were now seeing it as a
Yep.
concrete, realistic area. We knew where the mountain range were, we know where the vibranium mine was, we knew where the castle was, castle, the throne room. All of these things we knew because he had set it up in advance. And the other thing he did was when he wrote the Zorro comic strip for, I think it was like 2 years or something like that. He studied old California. He did a lot of research on
Yep.
that era and the Spanish influence at that time and certain geographical aspects of that. So that, and it's for a comic strip now, right? But again, he wanted to be able to set the fictional aspects of the story inside a real world experience so that the atmosphere and the authenticity of the experience hit us, far more enjoyably and engaging. And in some ways, he found terrain that he could use that put cliffhangers in there that wouldn't necessarily have been there if he hadn't done his homework. Again, you do your homework to serve the story, but it
Right.
also is serving yourself. You are
Oh
getting
yeah.
better. You are becoming a stronger writer because you are taking the time to polish these particular elements of
Right.
storytelling.
I want to go over two other smaller points
And then I
in
have
this.
one too. So you go
Yeah,
first.
let's just do it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's kill the word very. Very. Right?
Oh, the
If you
finger
find
does work.
yourself saying the outlook was very bad, consider, is it apocalyptic? Is it deadly? Is it catastrophic? And that's whether you're going to go on with the synonyms, or you're going to look up a thesaurus, other words for, synonyms for, and you can all do that online now. It's easy, or you could get one of these things. These people say, "What is this?" It's a book. Um, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Does it come
But
with an operator manual? Yes.
very is it's one of those crack words. A lot of kids or younger writers didn't live through the crack age, but crack was a drug that one of the defining symptoms of addiction is you always wanted more. Very, if you show up once or twice, it's going to show up often because it becomes a crutch and you don't have to think of a better word in this draft, in this fourth draft. If you see very, consider what word comes after it and okay, what's a better word I can use to get in exchange,
In exchange for
change,
very, yeah.
yeah, and then to get rid of very bad, deadly, something like that. I also want to go through and unteach something that's a lot
Oh,
of people have
mm.
been victimized by middle school teachers or high school
This is
teachers.
highly controversial, folks. Get ready for
Highly
it now. Here
controversial.
we go. Here we go. We
I
may
always
lose
got
some
into
listeners for
debates.
this, right?
If I walked into a classroom and a teacher had a poster about this, I would argue, and this is the argument I would
Tear it
make.
down. Tear it down.
So, yeah, yeah. The issue is that a lot of teachers teach said is dead. Don't use the word said. And then they'll have a long list of words you could theoretically use instead of said. And my argument is okay, let's have two people, Alex and Chris, having a conversation. Alex said, then Chris chortled. Alex guffawed. Chris snarled. Alex whispered. Chris bellowed. And what you have there is two psychiatric patients in a ward jabbering at each other because that's insane. Said does its job really well. As a matter of fact, said very often becomes invisible. We see it, but we don't register it. It's just an identifier. Bill said, fine. So you can use it without worrying about it showing up too often. In another episode, we'll do just dialogue, and then we'll talk about ways to handle that. But don't get caught up in using all those crazy different words in one scene unless you're writing the sequel to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Here's the other thing too, and Chris just actually alluded to it or mentioned it in passing.
Ooh.
Your third or fourth draft is also a good place to start thinking about the dialogue. And one of the particulars, and again, at some other time we'll go into this more in detail, but one of the other things that you particularly want to look at is it's not just, oh, what are they saying, but how are they saying it
Right,
in terms of are they in character?
right,
Because
right, right.
sometimes we writers we fall in love with the sound of our own voice and we're writing multiple characters going on there, but literally when you go to read it you could just switch characters for the lines. It's just so you've got to, again, it can be a third or fourth draft, maybe even a fifth draft, start to look at are my characters staying in character in their dialogue throughout the story. But again, not something you have to worry about first, second, or even really the third time around. But
The
fourth or
fourth,
fifth
yeah.
draft, you can start to really focus in on that.
I have an illustration of that, and then I have something that a friend of ours, Art Taylor, who edited a story I did for a ButcherCon anthology.
Hmm.
And I'll talk about what he says in a minute. So stay tuned.
Yes.
But in as you're talking about the sound of each character's voice, right? So there was a team that were working for Joss Whedon, whatever the politics about him, we'll set that aside now. That's not the point of this story. On a Buffy script. And in finishing it before they submitted it to Joss, they realized that in this final scene, Willow and Buffy had been doing most of the talking, and Xander had not. So they just took a couple of Willow lines and gave it to Xander so that there would be more balance in the scene. And Joss read it and said, yeah, this line and this line were originally Willow lines, correct? And you just switched the name.
Ho 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 ho
Like
ho ho.
he says, Willow speaks differently than Xander. Here's
Yep.
how Xander would say it. And he changed the line enough so that it sounded like a Xander line. That's what you're talking about, Alex. You're talking
Hmm.
about knowing the characters so well that the point of view that they bring to a conversation. I'm really going to have to just put out that question collection, right? I have a series there over 150 character analysis
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
And you don't have to do all 150, but they're fun to walk around with. If you're in the mall, you look at one, all right, how would he say that? What's his thing? And the more you know about he, she, them, and how each would, well, what each's experience is, experience informs dialogue,
Hmm.
dialogue, dialect, cadence, and the more you know, ding, 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 the better it's going to be. Right now, Art Taylor, I had a draft sent in to him about it was the Hellhounds, or their character, those characters, and
Those are your characters.
well, my characters, yeah, and they were having dialogue, and Art sent it back. He says, make the identifiers work harder. And I was like, can you explain that further? He says, this guy is saying something, but if he's putting together a bomb, or if he's pouring a drink, or if he's, you don't want people pounding the table all the time, but if that's that one moment where that would be appropriate, then you're identifying him or her or them with action.
Mm.
So the dialogue is broken up a little bit, but it's broken up with a movement, with a physicality, with an action. It expresses attitude towards the conversation. It expresses patience, impatience, any of those things in physicality. And when I learned that, the stories improved vastly, and I got to challenge myself to not be, I don't want to say lazy, but looking an easy way out. Because you can just have 17 occasions in a short story where someone raises an eyebrow. Okay, yeah,
Unless
but
you're Leonard Nimoy, you know.
what does that, yes, but even that's a great example, because
Yeah,
even Spock, it would happen once an episode.
yeah.
Right? Imagine if Spock was just walking around like this all the time, eyebrow
Popeye.
up.
Yeah.
What would it mean? So that whole thing, having respect for yourself and your artistry and your characters, that you can think of, okay, what would they do and why would they do it? He pulled his shirt. Why? Is he because he got a pot belly and he's like self-conscious, or is he trying to cover the gun because he thinks
Yeah.
there that's where it gets so much fun, and it gets so rich and so rewarding to give yourself the time to think, fully commit to the story. That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Ah,
Okay.
okay, we want to go to the proofreading. Right, in this part there's that proofreading part. You go through this, but there's another thing you're looking for, and that's repetition of words. Right, if you have a cow in the story, and when you do the search for the word cow, 800 times you use that word, then you're going to have to look for, is there other, no, because it just gets to be too much, right?
Yeah.
And that's for common words, repetition of common words, right? And going through that, it's a pain in the ass. John Saul was giving a talk at some writers convention, I was at, and he was like, this part is a pain in the ass. Pieces, but you have to do it. You have to do it because otherwise your writing is duller than it could possibly be.
Mm.
So if you want, and he had numerous books out. This is one of the reasons, is because I do this step so that it's better than it was,
Mm-hmm.
and before it goes to press. So if you're using the man, it loses its power. What else can you say in that? Was he the bully? Was he the cop? Was he the butcher? What is,
Mm-hmm.
but the inverse is true for less common words, right? You can't get away with using marsupial more than one or two times in a whole story. Just it sticks out too much. Or
Grievous.
grievous.
Yes.
Yes. Now that's an interesting. We had a pregame conversation
Yes.
about
In the
this.
green room, we were. Yes.
Yes, if you have someone who says this was a grievous assault on her person,
Yes.
that's a powerful word. But if you use grievous seven more times, that's in itself grievous.
Yes. Yes. A
It's
trot.
for the less
Yeah.
commonly used words, you have to use them like a strong spice,
Mm-hmm.
where you use to just
Dash.
accent the
Yeah.
meal, not kill the meal.
Yeah.
When we were in
Overpower.
college, my buddy and I, we were broke, right? We were sharing a house, but we were broke. The house was with a converted garage, so don't you start thinking, "Wow, fancy." Mm-mm.
I'll
we,
tell you about
we
my sharing a house with some
yeah.
friends another
So
time. Yeah.
so it was
It
the
was a
time.
house.
It was the time in history where you could buy 5 boxes of macaroni and cheese for $1. You know what I'm saying? So we had 20, 25 boxes of macaroni and cheese, and then he says, let's spice it up. Let's just change it up. It's like third or fourth box of macaroni and cheese we had that week, right? He's talking to me, and he's, well, just put in some pepper. And he thought he had the sifter on, but he had the spoon open, so it was a right. And he goes, wait, we'll just wash it off. So we just put it in the sink, wash it off. But it all we had for dinner that night was pepper. with little macaroni and cheese spicing in the back. That's what I mean. You can't
But your sinuses
overdo
were
it.
clear for a week.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Smell that fresh mountain air.
Yeah.
Bungled. Your characters can't bungle more than one thing in a story. If they're bungling all the time, then they're just rodeo clowns. And if that's not the setting of your story, it's a problem. Antiseptic. And these are just there's thousands of examples, but antiseptic. Alex, during the pregame, Alex said like a hotel room. I said, yes, but if you go into a hotel room and it smells antiseptic, you want to know what the hell happened in there.
Yeah,
Who's the
truly.
guest
Was
before
CSI in
you?
here before?
Was it a murder? What
Yeah.
happened? You want a motel room or a hotel room to smell fresh.
Hmm.
But if it's antiseptic, that then if you're using antiseptic, it's a negative detail, right? If you're going into a hospital room and it's antiseptic, you can understand, right? So knowing context, and also if you use antiseptic for every room you walk in, unless it's some kind of crazy, it's a hint that the character is nuts. If it's serving the story, that's an exception to the rule. You know what I'm saying? But you just can't overuse this. Another exception to the rule, if we go back to Grievous, we were talking about if you had one of those blowhard lawyers who isn't good, but is trying to pass himself off as good, and everything's Grievous, then the audience, the reader, sees, wow, this guy's he's a no
I'm
method.
actually going to step back one notch to the antiseptic again for a moment, because one of the thoughts that just ran through my head as you were talking is, if you have, for instance, a serial killer whose one of his trademarks is that after he's committed the murder and whatever, he does wipe the space down.
Mhm.
So it has that smell, is that antiseptic smell.
Right.
You still wouldn't use the word antiseptic every time they came upon the scene of one of
Right.
his crimes. You would
Right.
still have to vary the choices, the descriptive choices
Right.
at some point, because
Faint hint
otherwise,
of
again, it would then
bleach,
kill the
cleaning
mood. It
product.
would
Yeah.
pull people out of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's all it underscores, Alex, your point underscores what we're trying to say in this episode, which is to in the fourth, when you're going through the fourth draft, that's where you pay attention to words and your intention with the words,
Hmm.
right? And is there a way to avoid repetition of words? Is there a way to use a better word? And always do those words serve the story and enhance the character? Does it sound like the character? Then the word is usable.
Hmm.
If it is used too much, does it take away from the character?
Exactly.
I'm going to change it up. It's all in service of you telling your own
Damn.
damn story.
And let us give them a little bit of a tip at the end here, a little extra tip, a little clue, something that might help you in your process if you are going now to grab up your most recent works and start revising it based on some of the things that we've said. One of the little rabbit holes that's a number of fledgling writers fall into, sometimes people who've been doing it for a while too, but we get hooked on either the characters speaking or seeing. Almost in every scene, what we're relating or how we're relating the exchange is through what they see or what they say. Remember, we have more than two senses. That's right. There can be sight, absolutely. There can be sound, absolutely. But there can also be smell, touch, taste, and even the environment, the feel, the temperature of the environment has an
Yeah.
effect on us. Walking into a certain room that's very cold, especially if we're concerned or apprehensive about something, has an effect on us. Stepping out onto a sun-soaked beach with the sea roaring in gently has an effect on us. So go beyond those first two sort of knee-jerk senses and explore some of the others as ways of varying some of your descriptives.
Yeah. Just last night, one of the things that fall onto me a lot is taking the dog out to do whatever the dog
That's
does,
Sonny,
right?
his security guy. Yeah.
That's right. You've seen him around once in a while, making
Yep.
the place safe for humanity.
Yes.
It, like anything, becomes a routine, and it feels the same way each time. Walk, take care of it, blah, blah, blah. There you go.
He does his
Plead with
number.
him to keep going when he's decided, I'm going to sit right here. But last night, we step out, same as always, and he immediately jumps to alert. So I'm thinking there are deer in the backyard or wildebeest. But
Bigfoot.
but
Yeah.
so I become aware, and for the entire time we're out there, we're both on alert and hilariously aware of each other being slightly uncomfortable, which just elevated the whole thing. And all I could think of was, I don't know what's going on here. If we find out, we'll have to deal with it. But I'm going to stash this away to use in some scene somewhere. That the very ordinary, there was no smell, there was no, it was just, it didn't feel right. And it was fascinating. There have been fires. We both live in the tri-state area, in the New York, New Jersey border. There was wildfires recently. So we would go out this last week and smell, burnt trees or whatever in the far distance.
Mhm.
There was none of that. There was no explanation for why our hackles went up. It was fascinating. It was fascinating. So that's another thing that you do when you just file all those things away. And when you're doing this draft, this read through, this fourth read through, you might be stuck on, what do I do? What is it? And go through your experiences of whatever that scene is. Have you ever been? Yeah, maybe it's a car ride, and the car ride goes from fun and relaxed to tense. We've all been in that car. Go back and think about it, and think about what words, what actions, what movement, what activities are possible, and that will help inform your word choice, inform your actions, make your identifiers do more work for you, and help you tell your damn story that much better.
Chris, as
Sir,
always, thank you. It's been real.
thank you, sir.
Yes.
It is the honor of my existence to
Okay.
be in your presence, even
Yeah, where are my
in
presents?
Zumbala. What?
Where are my presents? Yes, right. It is that time of the season.
It's over here somewhere, and it's been over here for 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. Folks, be with us next week for more thrilling adventures.
Of
Right.
words.
Yeah. Either way, have a good weekend, everybody. Have a good holiday because it is that time of year.
Tis the season.
Yes, and we actually have a couple of really cool things coming. We've had several cool things already, but especially if you haven't listened to the Halloween episode, you need to go back.
Or the Thanksgiving. The Halloween one was really good, and the Thanksgiving one was really good.
Yeah.
Wherever that might be in our recent past or our near future. I don't know. I don't know.
Either way, folks, check them out and be with us next week. As a matter of fact, in order to be with us next week, what should they do, Chris?
You gotta hit and you got to subscribe, or else we may never see each other again, please. No.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Peace, everyone.
Bye-bye.